All right, well, keeping with time, we're going to get going. My name is Kathy Hoverman. Thank you for being here. I will be moderating today's webinar produced by the ASCE Environmental Water Resources Institute and AFS Bioengineering Section Joint Committee on Fisheries, Engineering, and Science. We're really excited to have you here today. We have a couple announcements to go through. You can find all of our webinars on our YouTube, webinars up to about 4 years ago on our YouTube channel. The series began in 2015 to share information on aquatic organism passage, dam removal, fisheries improvement, community and stakeholder engagement, and several related topics. Since our inception, we've been providing these free quarterly webinars, with today being the second from 2025. We do have our March presentation up on our YouTube channel now. I know there were a lot of requests about viewing that one, so it is available if you haven't seen that announcement. The joint committee is led by Amy, Mike, and Theo. We do a lot more than webinars, so if you're interested in what we do or have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of them at any time. Our next conference, something else we get going, our next conference is going to be held at UC Davis. So all you West Coasters, nice and close to you. Those of us on the East Coast, trip to California. So check out this conference. It's May 4th through the 8th at the University of California, Davis. Strategically placed between Sacramento and San Francisco. The theme for the conference is Headwaters to Seawaters to Estuaries, Sidewaters to Estuaries, improving watershed connectivity and process through restoration, revitalization, remediation, and reintroduction. The organizing committee is still working out the details for the conference, but it should be a pretty epic event. They anticipating to have a few workshops, field tours of the local area. Early May is a great time to be in Central Valley of California as the weather is typically sunny and warm. There's plenty to see and do throughout the area before or after the conference. It's also a short ride to the state capital, Sacramento, and you can be in San Francisco or Napa Valley or the Pacific Ocean or Sierra Nevada mountains, including Lake Tahoe, in under 2 hours. The organizing committee is looking forward to seeing you there. I believe they're also already accepting sponsorship. So if your company or organization is interested in sponsoring the conference, I believe that is available as well. All right, we have a LinkedIn page. We only have a handful of followers at this point. It's pretty new. We'd love for more folks to follow our page. We'll start putting more information out there and accessing it for our various elements that we put together. So join us there. Something else we have as a resource to communicate with folks and share knowledge is our dam removal training resources. You can find those on our website under education. All right, our webinar list has changed a little bit. We've had a few changes because of federal employees who couldn't quite commit to doing some of the webinars. So we are reorganizing what we have set up for the last half of the year. We will still have 2 more webinars, but they are still in the development process. And then just a quick shout out to the guys on the committee with me. Appreciate everybody's hard work in finding us great speakers for each of these webinars. Now, with that in mind, we're going to go into today's webinar. We've got 3 great speakers for us today. First off, Landis Hudson is the executive director of the nonprofit Maine Rivers. She has an undergraduate degree from Oberlin College and a graduate degree from SUNY ESF. And I just learned she has an art background, which is pretty cool. She's also the mother of 2 twin daughters who grew up hearing a lot about eels. That's great. Nate Gray is a scientist with Maine Department of Marine Resources within the Sea Run Fisheries and Habitat Group. He's been working on the Kennebec River Basin since 1992 and works actively on river herring restoration projects as well as other diagenous species. He witnessed the removal of Edwards Dam in Augusta, Maine in 1999 and has seen the population of river herring rise from a remnant to over 10 million with the installation of multiple fish passages, dam removals, and the opening of thousands of acres of historical habitat in Kennebec drainage. Nate is a Pisces and enjoys fish a lot. These are his words. Great stuff, Nate. All right, and then finally rounding it out, we've got Matt Streeter. He's a project manager for Maine Rivers. His undergraduate degree is from Dartmouth College in Maine. Matt has worked on several successful stream restoration projects with Trout Unlimited, including the Suet, man, I probably said that wrong. I'm sorry, Matt. Suet Brook project, which restored the aquatic connectivity of vital tributary of the Crooked River, key for Sebago Lake's salmon population. An avid fly fishing angler, Matt is committed to habitat restoration. All right, thank you three for being here. I believe Nate is going first, so I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to him and appreciate your time.
Okay. All right, here we go. Let's see if we can get this to work. Share. Let me know if that's working.
Looks good.
All right. Well, again, my name is Nate Gray. I work for the Maine Department of Marine Resources. I've been with the department since 1992. I work extensively on river herring restoration, as well as a multitude of other species. We have a diadromous suite here, which includes the American eel. I work with those as well as striped bass and sturgeon and smelt and a bunch of other stuff. This presentation I'm going to give you is a brief overview of river herring ecology, and we'll hop right to it if it works. Let's see here. There we go. This is river herring distribution in general. Alewife on the left in pink, blueback on the right in blue. Sorry, any Canadian participants. I did not go into the Maritimes. I stole this directly from NOAA. That's the range, historical, essentially down to the basically Georgia or the Carolinas for alewife, and all the way down into Florida for the blueback herring. Historical distribution today, currently, because of the big three, pollution, overfishing, and loss of habitat, we've seen the decline of our river herring populations around about 96%. We're at roughly 4% of historical norms, and we'll just keep moving right along. Alewife life cycle, typical anadromous life cycle. They're an oceanic fish. They are anadromous. They have to spawn in fresh water. The adults come in the spring now. They spawn and leave, unlike the Pacific salmon. A good chunk of them survive the spawning effort and return to the ocean to try again. Typically, they can spawn up to year 9. They're sexually mature at year 4. We see an occasional 9-year-old come back as a repeat spawner, having spawned several times in its life cycle. Females carry about 100,000 eggs on average. Survival is roughly 1 in 50,000 from egg to adult. The juveniles will stay in the lake and pond systems, or i.e. the river system, depending on which species. Blueback herring inhabit rivers and streams mostly, and alewives ponds and lakes. Fall time comes, primary production begins to collapse. Typical of the anadromy, they run back to the ocean when things start to go south as far as food is concerned and temperature. And they migrate back to the ocean, live for 4 years, and come back and return as sexually mature adults. This is some boilerplate from the original restoration efforts on the Kennebec River. Achieve an annual production of 6 million alewives above Augusta, which is the state capital. Also where Edwards Dam used to exist, the first federally mandated, removed, and FERC licensed dam in the nation on the Kennebec at head tide. Also to achieve an annual production of 725,000 shad above Augusta. And there's a "where are we?" question mark, and those question marks are going to remain firmly there because in order to do shad population studies, you got to catch them and do something, and they typically don't handle getting caught or doing anything to them without really skewing your data. So I use anecdotal evidence based on the recreational fishery that occurs there. And I can tell you with some level of confidence that the shad fishing, at least up in Waterville below the lowest most dam on the main stem Kennebec, is outstanding. This is the greater Kennebec River Basin. This is, if the ponds are in blue, they've been reconnected through either dam removal or fish passage installation or a combination of both. It was a phased approach. Going back one slide, if you remember, the KHDG agreement, Kennebec Hydro Developers Group, was a consortium of hydro developers that basically paid for trap and truck for a period of time until they could get suitable fish passage designs implemented at their sites. Interestingly, if you look in the lower center of the screen, you will see a lake called China Lake, which you will hear a lot more about today. That lake is now firmly blue. We'll cover that in a moment. For those of you or not ecologists, which I'm a trained one, and I say that loosely because the more I figure out, the more I realize I don't know anything. But it's an interesting definition. Basically, it's from the Greek, and it means to study the house, and our house, everything in it. It's really a remarkable study, especially when you look at river herring. When we go on, oh, there goes my light. Well, I'll wave my arms. Nothing's going to happen, though, unless I stand up. They're automatic lights, by the way. They turn off by themselves for state workers when we're not doing anything. It's really been a remarkable trip from going from just being able to get a hold of a handful, maybe 60,000 fish in a spawning season below Edwards Dam prior to its removal, and putting them in trucks and driving them up to those lakes on the previous slide and stuffing them in those lakes, and then turning around and doing it all again for about 6 weeks, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. We managed to get the population bumped up enough that once Edwards Dam came out, we had some fish to work with significantly. Subsequently, years later, in 2008, Fort Halifax Dam was removed on the lowest most one on the Sebasticook River, the largest tributary to the Kennebec Basin. And that allowed fish access up into places like Patty and Lovejoy and Unity Pond and Plymouth and Sebasticook and Pleasant Lake. Ecology, ecosystems, ecosystem services. Really remarkable watching this machine take off and having a front row seat to looking at this machine empirically, seeing what happens as these fish repopulate once historically accessible habitat. The Industrial Revolution pretty much, wrote the epitaph for these species in the greater New England, in fact, eastern seaboard, which it only lasted about 110 years. But it was enough to wipe out a good portion of certainly river herring, as well as multiple other species of fish. Keystone species, it's really kind of interesting to look at this in the bigger picture, in the bigger sense. Indeed, river herring are keystone species. They have a huge impact on the ecosystem in which they live. And the take home here, if you lose a keystone species, the ecosystem will be dramatically different or cease to exist altogether. It's easy to say, but it's much harder to recognize in the first person. It's kind of like not seeing the forest for the trees. Very difficult to understand what ecosystem collapse looks like unless you have prior knowledge of what it was like prior to its collapse. And we see, literature from the 17th century and 18th century where, they were selling America to the European colonists that you could walk across the fish on their backs. And when it comes to river herring, I can tell you definitively that there was no hyperbole there. They indeed could walk across their backs because I've done it. They really do come in thick this time of year. We're on the waning side of things. Okay, on to the next slide, which is this slide. This will give you some indication of how complex ecosystems are. This is a simple ecosystem, one function, filled with all sorts of parts and pieces. It's the cockpit of a strictly analog 747, one of the largest airliners ever to be built. 7.5 million parts. Half of those are fasteners, 200 miles of wire. 140,000 pounds of fuel minimum. This is the NASA version that was used to shuttle around the shuttlecraft, also a very complex but hyper simple ecosystem designed to just merely keep you alive through the atmosphere, just like this thing is. Here it is in function, okay? When we come to real ecosystems, the 747 is a useful analog to understand how complex real ecosystems are. Because we can look at every design drawing for this aircraft ever since its inception to today, and we can basically review every part, every component, every piece. What's the most important pieces, whether it's the Rolls-Royce engines or the GE engines or the fuel or the co-pilot or the pilot or the bathrooms or the seats or the galley or the flight crew or the runway or the air that it flies through. We can define all of that simply, but in natural ecosystems, we're just barely coming to grips and understanding how truly complex they are. Another very small, although albeit extraordinarily expensive ecosystem is the International Space Station. Again, we can describe every component of it, designed to do one thing, merely stay in orbit and keep the astronauts alive while they study microgravity in space. Here is our sweet -1, which is the Atlantic sturgeon, which I couldn't fit on there because it's too big, mostly to scale. We have the striped bass and American shad and alewife and blueback and Atlantic salmon and eel, lamprey, short nose, smelt, and tomcod. That's the vast bulk of our diadromous suite of fishes, all of which currently reside in the Kennebec River Basin, as well as most of the rivers in Maine. I say that loosely because Atlantic salmon only occur in a few. Yeah, all right. On to the meat and potatoes. How am I doing on time? Am I running over?
You're getting close.
All right, here we go. You ready? All right, ecosystem food web. Here we go. A simple food web. We're going to start with the first three. Here we have our amazing phytoplankton and our amazing zooplankton and our amazing alewife. The one thing I'm missing here is the sun. Sun makes the phytoplankton go. Phosphorus being the controlling measure of phytoplankton. Zooplankton eats the phytoplankton. Alewife eats the zooplankton. And we're just going to burn through this thing. You ready? Here we go. All the things that come to eat these alewives and all the things the alewives interact with. Most people don't think of warblers as being connected to alewives, but they are indeed. The alewives raise the production level when they come in. Bug populations get bigger. The warblers do better. Their migratory corridors are usually associated with water bodies, i.e. rivers and streams, and everybody eats everybody. Eels, they eat them. Everybody eats everybody. It's really kind of remarkable, and the more you dig into this, the more you realize how truly interconnected that freshwater mussel there and the alewife truly linked. We've seen a decline in a lot of our freshwater mussel populations because of the fragmentation of habitat due to the installation of dams everywhere here in New England. And it just keeps going and going and going and going. Yep, black ducks do eat alewives, just like Doritos, especially in the fall time when the young are pouring out. They just eat them and eat them and eat them. And watching this machine turn back on, every one of these interactions we've witnessed firsthand. Here it is. Root cause of decline, us. Root cause of restoration, us. Impediments to restoration, us. These are the numbers. I haven't updated them yet, but I can tell you right now that China Lake this year, and I'll give you the final number after everybody's done. We've been open systems since 2022. This is the 4th year of counts at China Lake. We went from 847,000 in year 1 to 2.564 million, 725 this year. Last year being a big run at 3.2 million. And there you go. You can take control away from me now and pass it on to the next one.
All right, Landis, I believe you're up.
Great. So let's see. I think Nate's going to stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
Okay, and then I am going to share. And great. Does that look good?
Beautiful.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about our restoration work. My name is Landis. I'm the executive director of the nonprofit Maine Rivers, and honored to be able to talk to you all about this successful work that we've done. And it's always interesting to be able to share some lessons learned. A question I will be asking, is there a recipe for overcoming barriers? And when I'm talking about barriers, we're talking about physical barriers, but of course, a lot of social barriers as well. What is it that makes it possible to achieve the complicated success that we achieved? So the China Lake Alewife Restoration Initiative, Nate showed you the map of the watershed. It was our mission to figure out how to get fish past 6 small non-hydropower dams that were left in the outlet stream after generations of very inventive, creative, energetic work done to put mills of all sorts in the stream. So we had 6 sites that we had to work with. And our goal was to get fish up into China Lake, where they would be making their way up from the ocean. I include this image of the people who worked in the mill next to the first site that we worked on, just as a reminder of the history of the site, the intensity of the industrial use, and the fact that people are as big a part of this story as the fish. This is what we were up against. Looking at 6 dams, we were able to work on 3 complete removals, and in other places, 3 sites, we had to construct fishways. We did this in a miraculously short amount of time, 8 years, working with 2 towns. We had a lake level order, got to know 4 different town managers, 2 lake associations, so a lot of complexity. Nate mentioned the removal of the Edwards Dam in 1999. I would say the success of our restoration project is firmly on the shoulders of a lot of people who spent years and years advocating for free-flowing rivers. The removal of the Edwards Dam was absolutely historic and very important. There was also a tremendous amount of work done downstream to remove the Fort Halifax Dam from the Sebasticook River in 2008. My organization in 2014 organized a conference to look at the Kennebec as a whole and note the importance of the ecological value of Merrymeeting Bay, the importance of the Sandy River, the importance of the watershed for endangered Atlantic salmon. The work is continuing on for this 2nd largest watershed in the state of Maine, and I'm proud to have been a part of the restoration work on China Lake, but also proud to be part of the Kennebec Coalition that's continuing our advocacy efforts for the Kennebec. So the overarching story of fisheries restoration and diadromous species, as Nate pointed out, the trajectory with the vast number of dams, with history of pollution and logging, we are somewhere around 4 or 5% of access to historic habitat for diadromous species. So while we are thrilled to be able to talk about successes, it's also in the context of challenges. What are the barriers to success? I love showing this picture because this is from a pretty hot summer day when we were measuring the sediment held behind one of the dams that we were going to be removing. And this is something that I have termed the fear of the muddy trickle, which is something that you'll find when you talk to people about removing a dam. There's this ever-present fear that the river or stream is going to go away and you're going to be stuck with a muddy trickle. So this is something that we had to learn to address, along with a lot of other questions. I want to take this moment to offer my profound gratitude to Nate and Matt. You can see them here in waders. You can't tell how hot it was that day. It was very, very hot. Working with the 2 of them made this project possible. We had a lot of partners. We relied on a lot of experts and expertise from different places. Nate provided the vision and the enthusiasm and a lot of the science behind his years of work in the watershed. Matt brought in a level of pragmatism and brilliance that absolutely made this possible. So my hope today in being a part of this webinar is just to have an opportunity to thank them publicly for the vast amount of work that they did making this work possible. We had to learn over the course of time that we were working on this, how to have answers to the typical questions that people often answer. Remove a dam? Can't you just build a fishway? Who are you guys coming into town telling us what's going to go on here? And then there's always a fear of toxic contamination being released. So we learned the importance of having answers to these questions, and we learned the importance of finding opportunities to talk with people to share the answers. One of the questions we often find in the restoration realm is that on some level, people may believe the fish were never there. People have forgotten about fish that they never saw in their own lives. And in some cases, like in the case of this species, it had been 1783 since likely they were able to make their way into the lake on their own. We also learned to try and look at things from different people's perspectives. The first site that we worked at, we came to understand that people had this view of the mill, which has the dam underneath it. And when we started talking about removing it, this was what was in people's minds in terms of what we were talking about removing. And it was kind of a shocking and unpleasant idea for people to think about this structure being removed. Whereas this is actually the same site from a slightly different angle, but this is what we saw when it came time to remove the dam and the collapsing structure on top of it. So we spent a lot of time learning about how to communicate with people. And I would offer to other people involved in this kind of work, think carefully about your audience. Try to understand what they see when they look at a dam. Share news, share successes, and try to really understand what people's personal experiences are with the location that you're talking about. We were very lucky that within the town of Vassalboro, where the restoration work was going on, Nate and others had been involved in a successful restoration project going back to 2009 that allowed the town to bring back a run of alewives and receive harvesting revenue from it. So when they learned that our China Lake project was able to bring back a much larger number of fish, they were quite supportive. So we were very lucky in that sense, and it was familiar. So we did a lot of public outreach along the way, working with kids, bringing in conservation commissions, and we generally tried to find the ways that we could do the things that we could do to leave things in better shape than we had found them. This is a wall of information about the different outreach opportunities we often created. So we went to a lot of meetings. We organized a lot of meetings. We tried to share news about what we were doing before, during, and after. I would say one of the key things along the way is to, these projects are slow. We had 6 sites to work on. We were talking about river restoration. It's never one, it's usually more. It helps to enjoy the ride, find friends. We have here the former executive director of the Sebastopol Regional Land Trust. And we have Ray Breton, who's one of our dam owners, and there's Nate. So we found super helpful to have lots of connections to people in the community. And when we had meetings, we would invite them. We had a pretty wide array of partners, spent a huge amount of time and energy trying to get all the funding together. As we eventually would say to each other, the fish were ready. It was just a lot of work to get the people ready, get all the permitting and funding in place. So to wrap up pretty quickly here, you see 2 images here. Nate and Matt, yes, in what looks like a giant world of mud. And for some people, this is their idea of what would happen with the dam removal. They would imagine this world of mud forever. And in fact, that's not the truth. On the left is the image of the former impoundment, which is looking kind of like a small forest to me. So it's always tricky to try and tell people to rethink a site, rethink a location, and to understand the power of restoration and the most amazing energy that our natural systems have for bouncing back. So in the end, no money trickle, millions of fish, and a lot of great partnerships. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Matt.
Great. Thanks, Landis. That last picture is a really good place to start in some respects for me. Let me share my screen if I can find where to do this. There we go.
Bottom center of your screen, Matt. Wiggle your mouse back and forth. It'll say share with an up arrow. Yeah.
But that's not what I'm trying to share. How's that?
There you go.
Yeah.
Is that one?
And slideshow from the beginning.
Yep. Great.
Yep.
Well,
There we go. All right.
okay. So it
Sorry
looks
about
good.
that. So my role in this series of projects was project manager. When people ask me what that means, I always say I was the logistics guy. I did some fundraising, some community outreach, hired the contractors, hired the engineers, oversaw the project in a general sense. But I'm not a technical person the way that a lot of people on this call are technical. So I thought to myself, what is it that I could communicate that may be of interest to this group, but that isn't something they already know? And a lot of what I did on the ground from beginning to end of these projects is communicate with the people in the community. This was a small community, a small rural community, about 4,500 people. The stream that we were working on had 6 dams on it, but the whole stream was only 8 miles long. The dams were in a stretch of about 5 miles. So, and they were all within the boundaries of this one community of Vassalboro. And so I always like to start with this slide, kind of, I think of this as the heroic alewife making its way upstream. Sometimes I identify with that alewife in the struggles to get through community meetings and things like that. Thinking about the community and their way of thinking about this, we were always in favor of dam removal when at all possible. I know a lot of people on here do fishways. In fact, one of the people on here did one of our fishways, designed one of our fishways. But I think most people can agree that if it's practical to do a dam removal, then that's what you want to do. And that was a big part of what we wanted to communicate to people. But whatever we were doing, we had to be conscious we were coming in from outside. And I found Landis went into a lot of detail about concerns that people had, but I thought I pictured all of their concerns in much broader terms. And the biggest ones that I found were listed here, kind of the respect for the history of the site, the respect for the dignity of labor, which often was tied to the history of the site, as in my grandfather worked at that mill. Now you're tearing it down, that kind of reaction. And the dignity of labor is kind of tied into the importance of the dam itself in people's minds. Respect for the community and community members, broadly speaking, economic costs to the community, and on a practical basis, even economic costs to others like Maine rivers and other people. People were sensitive to that. We always tried to leave the community better off when we were done with a given project than when we arrived. And last on most people's list, frankly, is ecological impacts. With few exceptions, people only get to the ecological impacts when you've already addressed these first 5 or so questions. Here is a list of the barriers. I put on this slide the primary concerns of the landowners, because these were all, except for one, privately owned pieces of property. There's just some person who owned a property with a dam on it. The stream's only 15 feet wide. They're not big structures. But the concerns that the dam owners mostly had were first maintenance costs, liability and risks, and finally impacts on the community, essentially all the concerns that the rest of the community had. So the first conversation was always with the landowner before you got on to the concerns of the community. Here's that picture of the Massey sawmill. I've got this slide labeled "Respect for History and the Dignity of Labor" because it's a little bit of a sad reflection on where we stand and where I think a lot of people feel we stand these days with respect to the dignity of labor. And this place was just an old sawmill. It had gone past its prime, but many, many people in the community, when we were tearing this thing down, came up and talked to me about the history of the place, their personal history of the place, how their grandfather had worked there, how their father had worked there, how even in one or two cases they had worked there. This mill was operational until the early 1970s. Now, it wasn't still being driven by water, but this mill was operational until I think 73. So in this context, in this community, that was a really important fact to acknowledge. So here is the aftershot of that same scene. Now, this is viewed from downstream a couple of years later. That concrete wall that I'm leaning up against was the foundation of the mill building we were just looking at. But this is looking from the opposite end. But that what we did here in consideration for the historical nature of the site was we left about a third of the dam in place. You can see it up at the corner of this mill building. This was the grist mill on the site, built in the 1800s. We repointed the stonework down here. We rebuilt these retaining walls to protect all the infrastructure overall. And we routed the stream around this. It was a relatively small concession to make, but one that came from discussions with the community and the historical society and the owner of the property, whose family had owned this property for many generations. He had just bought it back from another owner, but his family had owned it for a number of generations. So I think that was a good solution here when it comes to kind of the respect for history and the dignity of labor and the people in the community. Here's another take on the respect for the dignity of labor. This is an alewife harvester down on the Sebasticook River. This picture was taken a couple of years before we started our work, but it's important to remind people that these harvesters are out there, and this is a part of the process too. And money came into the town. People made their living this way, and it's only possible because of restoration efforts that have taken place over the recent decades. And the more, the merrier. Here's a slide that I label "Respect for the Community." This is a site where we did Fishway, because the owner had built this park. This is private property. He had built this park for the community. It was the only place where kids could swim in the summertime. They couldn't go swimming at China Lake. There's no public place to swim there. So this was where kids had been swimming for a decade or so, where Ray Breton had built this park for them and provided canoes and a slide and a raft and everything, and he maintained this property. And he said, no, you're not taking this dam down. I don't care what it costs you. And so, you know, in the end, he had final say, and we built a Fishway there. But it's a case where if we had taken this down, it would have been ecologically better, but it would have been a big challenge with the community relations. Another angle on respect for community members, in this case, the community and community members. These are protesters out in front of the Massey sawmill protesting our plans to remove the mill. And these were people who, for a couple of years, they held us up for a full year in permitting, in the process of permitting, because they were objecting to what we were doing. And many times they raised the issues like the muddy trickle argument and things like that. And you know, these are people in their community. Some of them lived along the impoundment. One of the most important things as we went through this process and engaged with the community was to maintain a level of respect for these people who were doing everything they could to make our lives difficult. And I have a kind of a 10-80-10 rule, which is there are about 10% of the people who are going to oppose you from day one and will go to their grave opposing you on these projects. About 10% of the people support you from day one, and about 80% are in the middle who are open to hearing what you have to say. But those 80% will turn on you really quickly if you don't respect the other people in the community. So the next thing is project costs, and costs to the community. Obviously, try and keep the costs of the community to a minimum. We would have been shut down faster than you could imagine if we had tried drawing funds from the town's general fund that were funded by property taxes. It was a question that came up an awful lot. What are you going to? Is this coming from our property taxes? It was very good to be able to say no, they're not. Now, Vassalboro had an alewife fund because they had started harvesting alewives on Weber Pond. So that was kind of that paved the way for us because they did provide significant funds from the alewife fund for some of these projects. But people ultimately, you know, are pretty pragmatic. If you look at the construction costs and people who, one of the things they always say is, why don't you just build a fishway? Well, we all know that's not as effective in ecological restoration terms or in fish passage terms as just removing the dam in most cases. But the cost argument was also persuasive to people, even though they weren't paying it. They understood it and they were pragmatic about it. And these were the costs of their different sites. And if you summarize this all, the way I like to put it is, if you took this whole project budget and put it into, we got 3 fishways and 3 dam removals out of it. If you took the whole project budget, the whole initiative, and put it into fishways, you'd get 3.5 fishways. If you put it into dam removals, you get 22 dam removals. So it's another real important reason why we always go for dam removals when possible. Finally, leaving the community better off than when you arrived. Landis listed a whole bunch of little things that we did in the community to help out individuals who were affected by losing their impoundment and things like that. All that stuff was important, but I sum it up here with these 5th and 6th grade kids from the Vassalboro School who in this moment are out at the Massey site planting native shrubs and wildflowers. And we ran a program with the local schools for 3 or 4 years where we did several sessions in classroom, and then we brought them for a field trip on site. And after a couple of years later, I think Landis was down at the Box Mill site, and a couple kids came up on bicycles, and she said, "Oh, what do you know about the alewives?" And they knew a whole bunch about alewives, and they said, "Yeah, we learned this when you guys came to our classroom a couple of years ago," and they were high schoolers at the time. So this stuff lasts in the community, it lasts in the minds of these kids, and it really does trickle out to the community. So a big important part of leaving the community better off was outreach into the schools. So I'm going to go through these last slides pretty quickly. Here are some New England asters. Every single one of these purple flowers was planted by those kids. Ecological impacts. There's the small ecological impact. This great blue heron sat there every day and sat there and picked off juvenile alewives coming out of the Lad Dam. Here's another way that ecological impacts matter. The vast majority of people in the community, when they think about alewives, think about this Fishway, which is publicly, it's designed for public access. They go down there, they look at the alewives, they learn about alewives. There's a festival in the spring. There's a duck derby in the fall where people put ducks over that dam. That dam is the backdrop for wedding pictures and graduation pictures. This is an important part of the community now in very few short years. Now I'm going to get into quick before and after. Here's the Massey impoundment before, after 3 years, after 6 years. Here's the Lombard Dam site where Landis showed you the muddy trickle before. Here's after 2 years. Here's after 5 years. This is last year. Here's the Morneau Dam site. I've only got a picture after a few months, after 1 month, but still pretty dramatic. There's a Massey Dam site from an aerial view. You can see how we routed around that historical building. Here's the Ladd Dam Fishway. This is the one where the swimming hole is. And this is the Outlet Dam Fishway. Critical site because we had to manage that lake level, and we had to be able to manage that lake level in exactly the same way it had always been managed. There are hundreds of owners on that lake who would have been a real problem if we didn't. Here are some kids in 2014, so they're probably in the middle or end of their college careers by now. And there are our partners and funders. So thank you.
This is all great. Thank you all for this presentation. Just a quick reminder to everybody, please use the chat to drop some questions in. One thing I didn't say, and none of them said it either, is that this project is so good. It was the 2024 Project Award winner at the International Fish Passage Conference. So it's a huge accomplishment. They had awesome projects and the great data to back it up as well. So if you have a great project with great data, you can apply for the 2026 award as well. But this kind of like sets a pretty high bar for what a really successful project looks like. So great job, super great information. I think Nate has kind of answered the first question, but and actually Matt, you did within your presentation, but I'm going to give you a chance to just double down on anything you might want to say that maybe you just kind of glossed over a little bit more. So the first one that came in is, how did you counter the fear of the muddy trickle? And were you able to visit other past dam removal projects and or use photo analogs? And then how quickly did the vegetation reestablish itself? And I think the photos probably showed that. So maybe if you want to focus on the other two, if there's anything else you want to say on those topics.
Yeah, the muddy trickle was, there were people who raised this as a real concern, and then there were other people who had other concerns, but they found that to be something that was a hook that they could kind of communicate on. So if you're talking to the 80% in the middle, the simplest thing to say is look downstream or upstream a little bit. That's what it's going to look like. And anybody who thinks about it for a minute will realize that that's true. It's not, people really don't have a very good sense of what's going on with streams and rivers. So that's not always persuasive, so that you can show them pictures of other sites that have revegetated and things like that. Once we did that Massey site, we could take them right over there. And that was a really important thing.
Yeah, I would say one other way we worked our way around it, and it worked out well in the end. We had to spend an extra year working on the permitting. So we actually we released the water from the impoundment and allowed the revegetation to grow over an additional year. And so people got to look at it and got a sense of how the banks were going to begin to revegetate. And that, I think, was not exactly something we planned, but in the end, it ended up working out well.
Yes.
Great. Okay. The next question that has come in, looking at the budget breakdown, the lower costs of dam removal versus fishways is compelling. Are those costs on par regionally? And do they include the planning, permitting cost, or just construction?
Yeah, those are characteristic from what I've seen. This was, of course, you got to increase for inflation. Concrete and steel are and labor are going up especially rapidly. So fishways are probably even more disproportionately expensive now. But those numbers are pretty proportional within Maine with the projects I've been involved with and seen. Do they include planning, permitting costs, or just construction? They include engineering, construction, and project management, but they don't include a lot of the follow-up that we did on, they don't include revegetation. They don't include, one site we built a dam a bridge for a property owner and things like that. So they're focused pretty tightly on what it costs to actually do the project.
Right. But we could also add that fishways have maintenance costs that will go on and on and on into the future. Somebody's always got to be out there cleaning the fishway. There are baffles that are going to break. You can talk to people about maintenance, but when you're 10 years out and still cleaning things up, that's when you really understand it.
Yeah. We were talking about that yesterday, right? I think Nate had to go out and do some maintenance from some recent storms.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. So, all right, there was some questions about numbers. Looks like Nate's dropping in some numbers into the chat. There's some agreement on this. Let's see. Let's get to the next question. Thank you for sharing multiple perspectives from the project. Just some kudos there. Here's one. Are there requirements for post-project maintenance, and how many years is typical?
Some of the funding that we received for the dam removals came from wetlands mitigation funding, and we had 4 years of monitoring there, which wasn't initially easy to conceive of, but in the end, I think was a really good thing, and that's how we ended up learning a lot about the importance of native plants and removing invasive plants. So with this whole series of projects, it was not the case that we kind of rolled in with complete plans for the entire 8-year project. We were doing it, site by site along the way. So there were different requirements at different sites, but the longest we had was 4 years for the one source of funding.
I don't see any more questions in, so I'll just ask. I'll ask one quickly. Well, two. I'm actually going to Maine next week for a vacation. Can people go by and see most of these sites? Like,
Yep.
Are they all open to the public?
The Morneau site is, Matt had one picture of it because typically that's quite a private site. It's gated. All the other sites are quite readily visible. Lombard is a little bit more difficult, but you can see it. So, yeah, great. So my actual question about the project is, did you have any T&E, endangered species to worry about in any of these sites? It didn't seem like, I didn't hear anything mentioned about any precautions for critical habitat or anything like that. So we did consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in regards to the Atlantic salmon, Mermaiding Bay, strategic habitat. And, it's been quite some time since anybody's seen a salmon, certainly in that watershed. We've seen them in the Sebasticook, but, we had good partnership with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And, they wrote, basically a very brief biological opinion on the presence absence of that fish in regards to construction, i.e., don't worry about it, and just keep an eye out, which was very helpful.
Yeah. So it kind of answering your other question, can you visit? Yes, and the easiest place to visit is the Box Mill Fishway, which is, right next to the former American Woolen Mill. I can't quite guess how many students came by this year. We had busloads of students from a ton of the different local schools. Well, how many students would you say might have come by, Nate? 70, 100?
No,
More?
380.
Oh, 380. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's one of the other super cool benefits about this is to be able to talk to teachers, talk to students, talk to engineers, to be able to describe to people something that's happening while it's in the process of happening, and then to be able to come back. It's, astonishing to see the fish moving through the system. And that wasn't why we did it. We were working on the ecological part of it, but it was a really wonderful benefit and something that's fun to be a part of each year, to go by and talk to people about how it happened and why, and, go out there with the dam owner and talk about eagles and osprey and things that he's seen and things that we hope to see in the future. But yeah, the
Yeah.
numbers are amazing.
Another quick comment with respect to maintenance, that with the question on maintenance, we did offer the dam owners where there were fishways, we offered to maintain the fishways for 5 years. So routine things like the baffles breaking and things like that, we're covering for 5 years, and then after that they're responsible for it, because ultimately they're the ones who wanted to keep the structure. So and we did, as a practical matter, for most of the dam removals, also do riparian buffer management and invasive species management and plantings and stuff for about 5 years at each site too. So
Great. All right. I think I'm gonna do last call for a question. I think we're probably at our end here. I don't see any more questions coming in. Several comments about a great presentation. So I will agree with that. And thank you all so much, Landis, Nate, and Matt. This has been really fun getting to know this project a little bit better. And thank you for sharing your skills, your knowledge, and the project itself with all of us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
All righty. Have a great day.
You too.